Welcome to the Underline This podcast, where we unpack the big ideas hiding in the margins, because the best parts, they're between the lines. We have an exciting agenda for today. We are going to cover The Old Man and the Sea by Ernest Hemingway. We're going to give you an introduction to the book, an author, key themes and takeaways, memorable moments and quotes, hot takes, ratings, and final thoughts. We'll go from there. Let's start with the book overall. The Old Man and the Sea came out in 1952. It's about an aging Cuban fisherman named Santiago. Santiago has had a bit of bad luck for the past 84 days. He's been able to capture any fish. As a result of having such a long, bad streak, he's viewed as a failure. He actually has an apprentice named Marlin who cares for him, but because of the 84 bad days, his parents, referring to Marlin, they want him to work with someone else. They don't want him to work from someone who they view as a failure. So Santiago, quite literally, at least within the sphere of his life and being in the fourth quarter of his life, decides that he's going to go fishing alone, determined to redeem himself and end this bad luck streak. So on the 85th day, he goes out by himself, bringing some provisions, and goes out solo. While he's out on the ocean, he captures the biggest marlin he's ever seen, which tows him for about 3 days as he's holding on and struggling to capture the massive fish. It requires all of his strength and energy, and he holds on to it, but eventually he kills it with a harpoon. Now, the great tragedy here is that when the marlin is shot and is being pulled in, sharks pick up the scent of the blood and devour Santiago's prize marlin. Santiago returns with its remains, but with a new, refreshing perspective, which we're going to unpack here in a moment. So that's the plot of The Old Man and the Sea. Let's talk about the author, Ernest Hemingway. Ernest Hemingway was born in 1899 and died in 1961. He was born in Oak Park, Illinois. I will give a plug to PBS. There's an excellent documentary that talks about the amazing life of Ernest Hemingway. He is considered one of the best writers of the 20th century, and for good reason. I actually had the opportunity to go down to Key West and view his home, and man, what a romantic life that he lives. And when I say romantic, I mean just that he has so many unique experiences. He's known for themes throughout all of his books that cover topics such as war. They talk about masculinity, courage, loss, the human condition, stoicism. There's actually a concept for his writing that is very prevalent called iceberg theory, which refers to revealing just the surface while hinting at deeper themes. And that's exactly what I found here with The Old Man and the Sea and a lot of his other books. As I mentioned before, I view Ernest Hemingway's life as being very dramatic, adventurous, and almost very romantic, a life that a lot of us would like to live. But of course, it ended in tragedy. We'll talk about here in a moment. But Ernest Hemingway had a love for outdoor activities. When I say outdoor activities, he was involved in bullfighting. I don't know if that constitutes an outdoor activity, but we'll throw it underneath that umbrella. He loved fishing in Key West. He was a camper. He's someone that loved hunting big game in the United States and especially in Africa. He served in World War I as an ambulance driver at the age of 18 in Italy, and he was actually wounded during that war. In the 1920s, Ernest Hemingway joined a group of expatriates who moved to Paris, and in his lifetime, he would live in the United States, Spain, Cuba, France, and in the United States, specifically in Key West and Idaho. And many of these places he lived in were to cover World War II, the Spanish Civil War, and also learn how to become a better writer. He's also survived two plane crashes in Africa, which I think is pretty impressive. One plane crash enough is pretty impressive. He wrote books. Some of the other books that he wrote were The Sun Also Rises, A Farewell to Arms, For When the Bell Tolls, and he received the Nobel Prize for Literature. I mentioned that there's a lot of tragedy in Ernest Hemingway's life. He suffered from severe depression, alcoholism, abuse as a child, which later in life he ended up isolating himself. And on July 2nd, 1961, Ernest Hemingway committed suicide in Ketchum, Idaho. Now, this tragedy and just the life that he lived reminds me of Anthony Bourdain, someone who was adventurous, had really unique life experiences, many friends, and lived this lifestyle that many would envy. But something to be said about just a tremendous life that one can live is that no matter how good the experiences, the friends and the things going on, it doesn't heal our pains. And Anthony Bourdain, as well as Ernest Hemingway, are just examples of people who, again, they lived lives that we all envy, but in the end, they took their own lives, which shows that there are some pains that we need to deal with that can't be healed through just living rich experiences. So despite being larger than life, nobody is immune to pain. That's kind of one takeaway I have from just watching and learning about Ernest Hemingway. On a lighter note, let's talk about some of the key themes and takeaways from this short but powerful book. I talked about iceberg theory earlier, which, just as a reminder, iceberg theory refers to Ernest Hemingway's style of writing that's found in a lot of his books. That's where you get really just like a surface level story, but it hints at deeper themes if you actually take that deeper dive and look and explore what's going on. So when you look at the book, The Old Man and the Sea, on the surface, applying iceberg theory here, it seems like a book that is about a old man that's trying to catch a fish for 3 days. And that's definitely not the case. The marlin is absolutely a symbol for Santiago's redemption. It represents his pride. It represents man versus nature. And that's going to be the first theme that we're going to talk about, which is man versus nature. When I look at The Old Man and the Sea with the lens of being a story about man versus nature, I actually see Santiago as being the fish that's fighting and nearing the fourth quarter of his life. And there's that conflict. So although Santiago is holding on to the fish and trying to capture it so he can kill it, I almost see that one reason why Santiago, as he develops and he goes through those 3 days and develops this respect and admiration for the marlin, he, I think, sees himself, and this is my take, he sees himself as the fish that's being pulled in by mortality. And that's where he really is inspired and has these powerful ideas in his mind. But it is, again, a really deep book if you take the time to think about its message and think about the symbolism. The next theme I want to talk about is pride. I mentioned before that the marlin represents redemption, pride, man versus nature. Now, in the sense of pride, Santiago, quite literally in the scope of his life, has lost everything. There's references that he is a widower, he lost his wife. In the community that he's from, people view his lack of being able to catch a fish in 84 days as an issue with him. So he loses respect from the people in his community and for his profession. He has a apprentice who looks up to him and still respects him, but is forced to work with someone else. So one thing to keep in mind about pride is that ego is not your amigo, which I think is appropriate to say since this is about a Cuban fisherman. So the pride here is that Santiago has lost respect from the community and the people around him. He's is seen. He probably thinks that others view him as old and foolish and weak because he's reaching the end of his life and he's not able to fish anymore. And and the reason I say all these things isn't that I have these opinions about him being old and foolish. I'm just trying to put myself in his mind, which I think that's something that's really powerful that Ernest Hemingway does with his writing, is that as you read this, you can really relate and you can feel how Santiago is feeling, whether it's just going out and fishing and just being able to experience what it's like to be a fisherman in that part of the world, or even just someone being able to get a sense of how he's feeling, what he's thinking. But the reason I bring all these things up is because that's why Santiago is willing to risk his life at redemption to earn back that respect for himself. He's clearly trying to go for the win at this point in his life, whether to earn the respect of those around him or even just respect for himself by pursuing the fierce marlin. The next theme is dignity in defeat. I mentioned earlier that towards the end of the book, despite capturing the marlin and shooting it with a harpoon and bringing it in, before he's able to bring it back to his community and show what he's caught, a group of sharks pick up the scent of the blood and they eat the marlin and they devour it. So unfortunately, Santiago is not able to bring back the trophy fish to his community and show off what he was able to accomplish. But the theme of dignity and defeat is powerful here because despite having that trophy, it raises the question because at the end of the book, Santiago is still he comes back with dignity and he feels accomplished and he's endured and he's done something very difficult. So what is the trophy here? I mentioned before that I viewed it as being able to bring the marlin back to shore, but that's really not it. The trophy here is the effort. It's the endurance. It's the 3 days of holding on to that marlin and being tugged by it and being pulled farther and farther away from shore. It's putting one's it's Santiago put himself in danger, but still holding on to the prize. So it's an interesting concept to think here of what is the trophy, because by the end of the book, it's clearly the fact that he was able to pursue this marlin and fight it for 3 days. And that's really contrary to, I think, the modern mindset that we have today of posting everything on social media, especially our highlights and our achievements and our accomplishments. And clearly it's not the fact of having a trophy, it's the effort that's put into it. So that's the dignity and defeat, that there really was no defeat here. Next is endurance. Was it worth it to hold on to the marlin? I would say yes, as long as he didn't lose his life. But definitely was very risky going 3 days of holding on to a marlin just being pulled into the ocean. It's definitely dangerous, but that also raises the question, why do people do uncomfortable, dangerous things? And I'd say it's because of the challenge. We earn, maybe it is that we earn respect and that's what we're striving for. Or maybe it's that self-respect that we're pursuing. That by doing something difficult and doing something that is an extreme challenge and putting ourselves in uncomfortable and dangerous situations, that we bring back scars and we bring back stories and experience and a new perspective. And that's exactly what's going on here. Is this is a story of endurance as this fisherman is holding on and trying to capture this massive, massive fish. The next theme is isolation. Now, when you think of isolation, you can think of it as a positive or a negative. In this story, it's positive. The reason why I say that is because you get to see the inner dialogue going on in the mind of Santiago. He's focusing on more positive things as he's by himself. He doesn't have a radio. He begins to think about things like baseball, and then he has to try and he begins to kind of get down on himself for half a second, realizing that he was very ill prepared for what he's doing on this journey. But then he quickly says, "Well, think about what you do have. What resources can we use?" And I think that's really impressive. So it's just again, and this is something that I might talk about again, so forgive the redundancy, but something that I think is really impressive about this story is just the human condition to persevere in hard times. And I think that whether you're a fisherman or you're an athlete, it human potential to persevere is inspiring, and that's what Ernest Hemingway has done here. Is he has truly captured that in a very humble scenario where this is just a man that wants to get a win at the end of the day. Well, at the end of 3 long days. So it's in this isolation that we're able to see the human condition pump itself up to reinforce the ideas that are going to help help this man be resourceful, to endure and to persevere as he's trying to capture this fish, with whether it's to earn the respect of his community or for earning self-respect. So one of the big takeaways here that I have is that this story is very relatable. I mentioned before that it doesn't matter if you're a fisherman or an athlete. We're all going to be placed in scenarios where we have to endure, and it's up to us to add to that fuel. And we see here with Santiago how he's able to do that. He's focused on solutions and what resources he does have. And this really is the ultimate fishing book to inspire someone to go out and go fishing. Although, like I said, that's just the tip of the iceberg, is that this is a story about fishing. It's actually a story about the human condition, endurance, dignity and defeat, pride, isolation, and man versus nature. So let's talk about some key moments and quotes I really enjoyed. Again, the first one that I really enjoyed as far as moments is just reading the inner dialogue between Santiago and himself. And I really felt the pain. I really artificially felt the frustration and the patience needed for him to persevere. And I also felt the pain of seeing the sharks eat the marlin that he had spent 3 days trying to capture. All right, let's talk about some key quotes that I really enjoyed. Now that we're talking about the marlin, there's this inner dialogue that I mentioned before that Santiago has, and a quote that I really enjoy is when he says, again, referring to the marlin, "You killed him for pride and because you are a fisherman. You loved him when he was alive, and you loved him after. If you love him, it is not a sin to kill him, or is it not a sin to kill him, or is it more?" Now, one reason I really enjoy this quote, I may have misquoted it there, but I think you get the idea. And what this quote is doing is it's capturing the complex ideas, I guess just the guilt, the pride, the respect, the confusion that's going on in Santiago's mind because he just killed this marlin, but after 3 days, he himself has a lot of respect for the strength of that beast, and he's got pride in himself for capturing it, but he's also feeling guilty that he held on to it for so long. So he's questioning his actions. And something that this quote did for me is that it just made me question, well, how big? It actually made me go down a rabbit hole about marlins. So let's take a quick pause here about moments and quotes, and let's talk about marlins. First, the marlin that Santiago did capture would have had to have been the Atlantic blue marlin. Now, on average, these fish can grow up to 14 feet there, and that includes 1,800 pounds, and they can swim at 50 to 60 miles per hour. So the one in this book more than likely had to have been an 18-foot long marlin and around 1,500 pounds. And again, they can move 50 to 60 miles per hour, which is insane to me of how quick they can be. And if you haven't seen a marlin before, I do recommend Googling it just to try and describe what they look like. They have a big spear on the tip of their nose, and they've got a powerful tail, and they've got a powerful fin on their back. And if you look up pictures of what marlins look like, you'll see a plethora of fishermen standing next to these massive marlins. So the idea of a marlin being able to pull a fisherman for 3 long days, it's completely doable. It's not fake. This is actually a very, very beastly fish. All right, now we went down that tangent. Let's go back to the best quotes. Now, the quote that I think summarizes this book completely is this. And it's when Santiago says, "But man is not made for defeat. A man can be destroyed, but not defeated." Wow. I love that quote because it just takes the idea of power and endurance of the human spirit. And it really just reminds me of a rich legacy of people that, you know, they could not be defeated. Whether it's someone like Viktor Frankl, if you don't know who Viktor Frankl is, um, he's a Holocaust survivor that wrote Man's Search for Meaning. He talks about the idea of despite having everything taken away from you and being tortured and beaten, but at the end of the day, you still have your mind, you still have your dignity, and you're still human. So that quote just reminded me of Viktor Frankl, as well as even Rocky Balboa. And the powerful thing here is it doesn't matter who you are, regardless if it's again a fisherman, Rocky Balboa, Viktor Frankl. We all have that power to endure, and we all have that strength within us to keep on persevering. So we may lose our ourselves, but not our dignity. Next quote. I am glad we do not have to try and kill the sun or the moon or the stars. It is enough to live on the sea and kill our true brothers. Wow, another really impressive quote, high caliber writing and word choice. This represents the reverence for nature and our complex relationship with it. Within the circle of life, although I myself might eat fish, I can still have a respect and an admiration for it. And it's very interesting that in this story, and again in the circle of life, that there are tensions between survival and also just the respect that we have. Although we respect something, um, we might still try and compete and try and eat it. I just think that's a very complex idea, but very well put here. And part two, to kind of just further emphasize this, is this. Santiago's speaking to the fish and he says, "Fish, I love you and respect you very much, but I will kill you dead before this day ends." Again, just this complex idea of the circle of life and the tensions between survival and respect for nature. This reminds me of UFC fighters. If any of you watch the UFC, it's so interesting seeing them at the weigh-ins, getting in each other's faces and being really competitive and just kind of seeing um, the lust for blood to destroy their opponent. But after all is said and done, there's respect. And there, just, despite there being a competitive desire to just completely destroy their opponent. Respectfully, of course. All right, next quote. Now is no time to think of what you do not have. Think of what you can do with what there is. I referenced this earlier on in the podcast, and this comes down to just resourcefulness, being solutions focused, being persistent, positive in hardship. And that's, again, this is when Santiago is reflecting on just the things that he forgot to bring or should have brought for a 3-day trip, not just a day of fishing. And again, very quickly, he corrects himself when he begins to think about what he doesn't have. And then it's almost like he just tosses that idea out and quickly tells himself, well, what do you have? And he's being positive. And there's something to be learned from that, I think. The next quote is, "It is better to be lucky, but I would rather be exact. Then when luck comes, you are ready." It's very interesting. I almost think that this mindset that Santiago has is probably the same mindset that someone like Michael Jordan or another star athlete has, where they believe that preparation and skills increases your chances of success. And you need to have the proper mindset in order to go out and pursue what it is that you're trying to accomplish. And it also reminds me of a quote that I've used. I think I used on the podcast when we talked about the art of war, which is, "He who is prepared shall not fear." So there definitely is a high value for skills and preparation rather than just gambling on what should happen. Now, the final line from The Old Man in the Sea, which I think is very powerful, is this. When it's talking about Santiago, he comes back, he's met by his former apprentice, he's taken to bed, and in the last sentence it says, "The old man was dreaming about lions." Why do I think that's powerful? Because let's do a thought experiment. Let's put ourselves in the mindset of Santiago. At this time, he has gone through a 3-day journey of trying to capture this massive 18-foot long, 1,400-pound marlin. And he accomplished what he set out to accomplish, but it was eaten by sharks, right? And so one of the impressive things here is that he has risen above human nature, which would be that I was doing this because I wanted to bring self-respect, I want to bring respect and earn respect back from the community. But the reality here is that he earned something which is more important, and that is dignity, self-respect. And here, just doing a thought experiment where we imagine we're Santiago going through those 3 days and coming back and sleeping. Why is he dreaming about lions? And it's because he just went through this very powerful experience. So when you think about power, by the times a lion comes to mind, and a lion is something that is it's nature, it's powerful, it's strong, and so here, Santiago, when he's dreaming, this is just a reflection on his subconscious, where he is maybe feeling like a lion, or maybe he has that respect for nature. I mean, there's a couple ways to interpret this, but my interpretation is that in this mindset, we're getting an inkling, we're getting a view of his subconscious, which at this time is full of dignity, youth, a love for nature, and strength. All right, now I want to talk about kind of a shift in perspective I had after reading this. One, this was a reminder to me of just the respect that we all should have for nature and also for ourselves and the potential that everyone has. And I did have a shift in perspective as well of just when I read this a long time ago, which has been a while. The copy I actually am reading came from my mom in 2006. I can see it. She bought it for $2.50. Thanks, Mom. It says, "For Jake, a great fellow reader. Heart, your mom." And when I read this back in 2006, I wasn't very mature because this was a long time ago, but I really thought that this was just a story written by a famous author. There's beautiful writing, but it's a story about a fisherman. And that's not the case. That's not the case. This was just a good reminder to me that despite the high caliber writing and the tip of the iceberg, it's a thought provoking read. It's inspiring. It's relatable. It's an example of the human condition. And it's a reminder to me, and it should be to all of you as well, that when you read a book, it's so important that if you want to get the full nutrition or the full value from it, you do need to take time to think about it. And luckily for me, as I'm preparing for each podcast episode, it forces me to have to really think and dive in deep to the book, which I'm happy to do for you. And I hope that you're learning from it. But that's just a reminder that a lot of these authors, they're not just writing a surface level story. There's really deep, profound ideas, and there's a lot of richness in it. And I hope that you can also take the opportunity to appreciate what comes from some of these famous authors, especially from Hemingway. Now, to talk about the author style, I'm really amazed with Ernest Hemingway's writing. You really can see and feel what his characters are going through, and you can see what's going on. I think that Hemingway did such an excellent job of capturing Cuban culture. Now, am I an expert? Not really, but I do live in Miami, which is, almost like it's an Americanized version of Havana. And, there is Little Havana, but, so I do have some insight because I do love Cuban culture and I have been able to experience it firsthand in Miami. And some of those things that Hemingway has captured is yellow rice and fish and coffee. I'm assuming that Santiago was drinking cafecito when he's talking about mixing his coffee with sweetened condensed milk. And also there's a lot of little details as well when they talk about Santiago saying his Hail Marys and praying, and also looking at saints, and looking at little things that that's pretty typically found in a Christian household, right? Whether it's a cross or a picture of the Virgin Mary. Another thing too that I think captures Cuban culture here is that Santiago keeps on thinking about baseball, which just shows that in his pastime he loves baseball. He loves the sport. He loves Joe DiMaggio, and so that's just all these little things just help. Whether you're someone who actually has seen Cuban culture firsthand or doesn't know it, you're getting insight into what it is. I mean, there's a lot of seafood, there's island culture, there's passion for Christianity, a love for coffee and baseball and the ocean, and that's just something that I think Hemingway did an excellent job of capturing and putting into his writing. All right, and another thing that I mentioned before, so I talked about how Hemingway did an excellent job of helping me as a reader feel what Santiago and his character is feeling, and also seeing what they're seeing. So throughout the book, I felt like I could smell the fish bait and I could see the ocean. And again, for me, this is very relatable because I live in Miami. I go out, I try and go to the ocean as often as I can, and so I have seen these things, and I can, maybe I'm related from my personal experience, but I think that I can't think of anyone better than Ernest Hemingway to recreate these scenes and experiences for someone. Just again, not that I'm an authority that can validate this, but he certainly did a good job because I have seen what the ocean looks like out there. I have seen just what I have gone fishing before, and Hemingway did an excellent job of just capturing that and recreating it through his writing. And I also felt like I could relate. When I say relate, I could feel what Santiago was feeling because of just that inner dialogue that Hemingway created, and also just those details as to what's going on in Santiago's life in this moment. And I mentioned this, I think this will be the third time, but Santiago, prior to capturing this marlin, has put myself in his shoes. He probably feels like he's lost everything. Again, he's lost the respect from the community. He has gone 84 days without capturing a fish, which makes him feel like he's being judged. That his career, his skills in life are being questioned, and he's also in the fourth quarter. So he's, because they keep on referring to him as the old man, and so he feels like he's lost almost everything. And so that's why he's willing to risk everything, because he feels like he's lost everything. And it really is this experience of capturing that fish that gives him back that dignity and that inner power. All right, let's get to the rating. So the rating that I give this book, The Old Man in the Sea by Ernest Hemingway, is 4.5. Now you say if, and in my notes I highlighted this 3 times. If you digest it. This is a book that requires you to think and to actually take time to let it marinate in your brain as to what's going on and have appreciation. Like I said before, I thought this book was boring when I was a kid because I thought it was just really good writing about a fisherman. And that's definitely not the case. This is a book that is thought-provoking, it's inspirational, and it will cause you to think if you take the time to do it. So if you don't do that, you'll probably give this book 2 stars. If not, or if you do digest it, 4.5. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to give you the conclusion. Now, I've highlighted that this story really is a triumph of the human soul. It's a story of perseverance, and it is very relatable, whether you're an athlete, a fisherman, or just someone that is looking for a win. And there's an excellent poem written by Robert Service called "The Quitter" that comes to mind, and I'm going to read this to you because I think this is going to end things on a high note for such an inspiring story. So, "The Quitter" by Robert Service. When you're lost in the wild, and you're scared as a child, and death looks you bang in the eye, and you're sore as a boil, it's according to Hoyle to cock your revolver and die. But the code of man says, fight all you can, and self-dissolution is barred. In hunger and woe, oh, it's easy to blow. It's the hell served for breakfast that's hard. You're sick of the game. Well, now that's a shame. You are young, and you are brave, and you are bright. You've had a raw deal, I know. But don't squeal. Buck up, do your damnedest, and fight. It's the plugging away that will win you the day. So don't be a piker, old pard. Just draw on your grit. It's so easy to quit. It's the keeping your chin up that's hard. It's easy to cry that you're beaten and die. It's easy to crawfish and crawl. But to fight and to fight when hope's out of sight. Why? That's the best game of them all. And though you come out of each grueling bout, all broken and beaten and scarred, just have one more try. It's dead easy to die. It's the keeping on living that's hard. And that's where I'll leave you today. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for listening to my thoughts on Ernest Hemingway's The Old Man in the Sea. I hope that I inspired you to read this short read. Again, it's only about 120 more or less pages. I think you'll really enjoy it. Please give us a follow wherever you listen to your podcasts. Follow us on social media, and we'll see you next time.